Okay, welcome to episode 61 of the Apple Podcast by MaxFuture.com. And this is March 4th, 2011. And it's been a great week again in Apple land. And Apple again hits it out of the ballpark. And how did they hit it out of the ballpark? Well, this week, the key event was on March 2nd, a Wednesday, when Apple held its iPad event. And Apple did not disappoint, because one of the most surprising things happened. Coming out of the darkness in a full crowd, and here's the keynote video from Apple, came Steve Jobs. And people were thrilled to see him because he's been out on sick leave. And he looked pretty healthy considering that he's out on sick leave. He was vibrant, he smiled, he's thin, but he's in good cheer. And he led a fantastic event. And what was that fantastic event? The fantastic event was that Apple announced the iPad. But before so, Steve went through some key facts regarding how Apple's doing generally in the iOS iDevice area. And this was very informative. So he goes through the stats, and he talks about the iBooks and how many iBooks are being sold. And he mentions that 100 million books have been downloaded. Now that's really significant because, Apple has been the sort of late to the game in terms of ebooks. So selling 100 million books is pretty impressive. Apple also announces during the keynote that Random House has now joined the iBook stable, which makes it so there are 6 major booksellers: HarperCollins, Hachette, Macmillan, Penguin, Simon & Schuster, and Random House. So all the big publishers are now in the iBook area. So basically, Apple's really doing well entering this market with ebooks. So then he gives another key stat. So the next key stat has to do with the kind of revenue that is going out to people who publish in the App Store and in iTunes. Oh no, before he gets to that, he points out that Apple has 200 million accounts with credit cards and one-click purchasing. And the reason he's doing this is because he's pointing out how powerful Apple's App Store is. So this is a real selling point to publishers. Come publish with us because we have 200 million accounts. So, Steve Jobs is giving out critical information before he gets to the key event, which is the new iPads. So then he goes to another milestone. So what's another milestone is the App Store. And, how much money developers have made. And his point is Apple's given out $2 billion in cash. $2 billion in cash to developers. That's not necessarily a big chunk of money for Apple, but for developers, it means a lot. And a lot of small developers can make money. So what's going on here, like he does often, Steve Jobs highlights key facts that shows Apple's success. Now, in terms of iPhones, this is not an iPhone event, but he points out that Apple just recently hit the 100 million iPhone milestone. So Apple has sold 100 million iPhones. So now this is a key theme that he's also going into, Apple's third post-PC blockbuster, because this is a key term that is bandied about in this keynote on March 2nd, that Apple has now entered a post-PC era. And I think Apple is using the word post-PC to blunt criticism by those who say that the iDevices like the iPhone, the iPad, do not do everything that a PC does. And what Steve Jobs is saying by using the term post-PC is that, hey, you're living in the past. you who criticize iDevices is living in the past, because we're now beyond PCs. So the key terms that he's hitting home here are that it's magical, revolutionary devices that's advanced at an unbelievable price. So he's delivering magic, revolution at an affordable price. So in other words, he's giving the common person, it's because ultimately it's the common person who needs an affordable price. He's giving them magic and revolution, and that's what he can give. So then here comes another key clue. He says it's the 2010 is the year of the iPad. And that's basically true. The 2010 was the year of the iPad, because as he points out, Apple sold 15 million iPads in 2010 in just a 9-month period. So he's setting the stage now for something big, because it's the theme of where Apple's going, and the theme of explaining to consumers, where Apple fits into their lives and into the computer world. All right. So before Apple actually rolls out the iPad 2, Apple shows a video to the audience that really explains how important the iPad has been in its first year. So the video really covers the gamut. It starts off by showing people getting the iPad on the first day, literally celebrating as if, this was the greatest thing that ever happened, and coming out with their iPad. The video features, among others, Phil Schiller and then Ron Johnson, who's the head of retail sales. And, so the video just really shows just the incredible excitement that existed on April 3rd of 2010 when the iPad first came along. But the video does more than that, because as it goes forward, it's going to talk about how it's really been revolutionary in all sorts of respects. It shows a young girl using the iPad with a piano, and with the iPad basically showing the notes. It shows young kids doing math and writing on the iPad. It shows kids gaming on the iPad. It shows people using as an astronomy app where you hold it up and look at the stars. It shows the DJing app where musicians are using it to DJ. It shows the iPad being used for GPS on a high-speed train. It shows people using it in the kitchen. It shows people writing Chinese characters on the iPad. It shows people riding around in cars and all sorts of vehicles and being on vacation. It shows the Square app and the Square device where you can use the iPad as a credit card. But then, as the video goes forward, it tugs on your heartstrings, because it shows the head of technology for Chicago Public Schools talking about how inner city kids in Chicago are using the iPad in their learning and their education. And, this is a powerful thing, because now you're saying it's not just any device, but it can possibly solve some of society's problems. I mean, the biggest issue right now in the country, one of them is schools and education and the cost of schools. But then it also shows the iPad being used at Beth Israel Hospital by doctors doing rounds. And so now we're starting to get a very emotional video, because it shows the chief technology officer of this hospital and doctors showing patient data to patients who are obviously very sick on the iPad, through apps that show, I guess, your x-rays or internal results. So this is now getting really powerful, because it's basically saying the iPad, is changing all sorts of ways of doing things in almost every part of society. And then there's a section on business and enterprise. It has the chairman of Salesforce.com talking about how that huge enterprise entity uses the iPad. And, so it's basically running the gamut in terms of who is using it in society, and that there are business apps that can be used. But the real payoff in this video is really towards the end of the video, because the real payoff is that the iPad is now being used to help special education kids who've got autism issues. And so it has a doctor from Children's Hospital talking about how this touch interface device is actually very good for children with special needs who are on the autism spectrum. So this sort of tugs on everyone's heart. It shows that this isn't just some cold technical device, but it's a device that can transform people, inspire people. And it ends with actually interviewing a mother whose son has autism, and how this device really has helped their lives. So overall, the video is very effective at setting the stage for what comes next in the iPad life. Okay, but before we actually talk about the iPad 2, I do want to say something that I think is very significant about Apple and Steve Jobs, because when I was watching this keynote on March 2nd, something really struck me, and I wrote about this, and I felt strongly about this. And my post was entitled, "The iPad 2 Event. Apple will flourish, but it will never be the same without the great Steve Jobs." And what I said was, unless you live under a rock, you well know that yesterday Apple announced the iPad 2, and that Steve Jobs was the keynote speaker. If you watch the video of the keynote on Apple's website, you will be amazed. Steve Jobs enters and the place goes crazy. He is giving a standing ovation. He has been on medical leave, so many did not know whether he would be at the March 2 event to announce the iPad 2. He was the key presenter. While he is thin, he showed high energy focus and the charisma that makes him the master presenter of gadgets. But as I watched the video, it made me sad. Sad because I know that one day, whether it is tomorrow or 30 years from now, Steve Jobs will no longer be with Apple. Sad because we will no longer have these incredible moments when Steve Jobs comes on stage and we are all amazed by what he says and what he shows us. I always appreciated that he is one of a kind. I always appreciated that he is the master presenter and unique among all CEOs or founders of companies. But it really hit me yesterday. This is on March 3rd, I guess I wrote this, how much I appreciate Steve Jobs. In this age when we celebrate startups like Google, Facebook, and Twitter, which came out of nowhere and became mega companies, many forget that Steve Jobs is the ultimate wonder kid. He was in his early 20s, a college dropout, when he and Steve Wozniak started Apple in the 1970s. And what is amazing is that he is still showing the passion for innovation, for creating, for changing our lives. Yes, there are other great startup guys, like the Google boys Sergey and Larry and Mark at Facebook and Biz and Tom at Twitter, but do any of them have the personality and people skills to come out on stage and put on the great show like Steve Jobs? The others give us great technology, but Steve Jobs gives us great technology and much more. He gives us dreams. He gives us hope. He gives us faith in the future. Jobs and Apple give us aspirations. Each one of his presentations, whether it is the iPad 2, the iPhone 4, the MacBook Airs, or the original iPod, is part P.T. Barnum, part Houdini, part religious revival. While politicians and other business leaders have systematically demoralized us in the past years, Steve Jobs has consistently come out year after year and delivered progress and hope in the future and tangible progress in the present. Our transportation infrastructure is crumbling. Our national financial system is in shambles. Our business sectors are struggling. but Steve Jobs and Apple are consistently hitting out of the park each quarter. And Steve and Apple deliver to us tangible proof of progress, magic, and hope in the future. Steve and Apple deliver products that are not today's products, but products we saw in our imagination or in our science fiction books and movies. So enjoy this moment while we still have the great Steve Jobs. Okay, so unless you were, I guess, living under a rock, Apple that day then announced the iPad 2. So, what were the key features, or what are the key features of the iPad 2? Well, the key things are that it's thinner, lighter, faster, has FaceTime, smart covers, and has a 10-hour battery. That's what Apple is emphasizing. So let's go to some of the key specs. The key specs are that it has a new processor, which is a dual-core processor, and the processor is saying, here's the spec, that it's up to 2 times faster. Now, Apple, in this post-PC era, does not break out a lot of specs. So basically, it's saying that it's 2 times faster. Now, the other key stat is that the video graphics on this iPad are 8 times faster than the prior version of the iPad. So in terms of performance, it's twice as fast, and here we go. No, 9 times. The graphics, which Apple describes as super graphics, has up to 9 times the performance. So a 2 times faster processor and 9 times faster graphics. But the thing is, Apple emphasizes that even with this faster performance, the battery life is still 10 hours of battery life. Now, what are other key things that are in the iPad 2? Well, the iPad finally has 2 cameras. And so it has a front camera and a back camera so that you can do FaceTime video chatting and also take pictures. But the camera's not a high-definition camera in the back, just high enough definition for high-def video, but not high definition for pictures. Now, the other key facts of the new iPad, in addition to the camera and the faster processors and the faster performance, is that it's 15% lighter, which Apple describes so it feels more comfortable in your hands, and it's 33% thinner. So those are generally the key things, the key improvements over the current iPad. And in addition, Apple added a gyroscope, which the prior iPad did not have, which helps with gaming. So those are the big things that Apple, added. Now, Apple announced other key things about the iPad. Apparently, it's devised a new cover, and it's called iPad Smart Cover. And the key thing here with the Smart Cover is that it has like a magnet. So the iPad has magnets on the side and the cover does. So you can just sort of snap on top the cover and it just snaps on. But you can also take it off really quickly. And then you can also bend it into all sorts of sort of origami-like shapes. So then, it becomes like a stand. And these pads, these iPad covers come in various colors and various styles. So they come in, I guess, like a polyurethane, sort of plastic, substance in the colors blue, green, orange, pink, beige, I guess, vanilla or brown. But then there's some dark colors that are in leather and more expensive. So on its website, Apple has a video that shows just how cool these smart covers are. Now, my concern is that the smart covers, although they're not going to stay on, because essentially they're just sort of these magnetic snap-ons just on the front. They don't cover the back. And they look cool in the video because you can fold them, they bend, they roll over, and you can make a stand. But what happens if you have them in a bag? Like, I put my iPad in a sort of a leather computer bag, and the current stand, the current cover stays on, but if it's only on one side with metal latches, is it going to get brushed off? But a lot of people are very excited about these covers that come in 10 different colors. So the other thing that Apple announced is that the iPad will come in 2 colors, white and black. But of course, this is only on the front side, on the rim. And look, I guess people are happy that there's going to be a white, because we don't have a white iPhone. But I don't know, I'm not too thrilled about that, because with white on the front, it sort of reduces the brightness of the colors on the screen. So I'm not too thrilled about that. But the other thing is that there's going to be 3G models of the iPad that work with AT&T and Verizon, but not with both. So in other words, one iPad is going to have a Verizon chip in it, and the other iPad is going to have an AT&T chip. So now you have to make a choice. Which carrier do you want to get? Because you're not going to be able to switch the iPad between carriers, because Verizon uses CDMA and AT&T uses GSM. So this is a little twist. I had been hoping that the iPad 2 would have some chip from Qualcomm that has dual use. In other words, it could be used on a GSM carrier or on a CDMA, but that's not to be. Now, in terms of the price, Apple is just maintaining the exact same price for these new iPads as the current ones. So in other words, the cheapest is going to be $499, and that's the Wi-Fi version. The other thing is Apple hasn't changed the storage sizes. The sizes of storage still come in 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. And some people are disappointed. They had hoped that Apple would go to a higher gigabyte in storage of 128 gigabytes. But I think Apple's challenge is to keep these prices. So, Steve Jobs and Apple sort of emphasize that, the prices are still very reasonable. So the Wi-Fi versions come in $499, $599, $699. So essentially, for $100 more, you double the gigabytes, and for another $100 more, you double it again. And the Wi-Fi versions are essentially $130 more. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi and 3G models are essentially $130 more than just the Wi-Fi counterpart. So they come in the models are $629 for 16 gigabytes, $729 for 32 gigabytes, and $829 for 64 gigabytes. And what Steve Jobs points out is that all of these models, except one, the $829, are cheaper than the $799 announced price of its only real competitor right now, the Motorola Xoom. So, I think these are great updates, and Apple's going to sell a lot of them. Now, in terms of the price, Apple is just maintaining the exact same price for these new iPads as the current ones. So in other words, the cheapest is going to be $499, and that's the Wi-Fi version. The other thing is Apple hasn't changed the storage sizes. The sizes of storage still come in 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. And some people are disappointed. They had hoped that Apple would go to a higher gigabyte in storage of 128 gigabytes. But I think Apple's challenge is to keep these prices. So, Steve Jobs and Apple sort of emphasize that, the prices are still very reasonable. So the Wi-Fi versions come in $499, $599, $699. So essentially, for $100 more, you double the gigabytes, and for another $100 more, you double it again. And the Wi-Fi versions are essentially $130 more. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi and 3G models are essentially $130 more than just the Wi-Fi counterpart. So they come in the models are $629 for 16 gigabytes, $729 for 32 gigabytes, and $829 for 64 gigabytes. And what Steve Jobs points out is that all of these models, except one, the $829, are cheaper than the $799 announced price of its only real competitor right now, the Motorola Xoom. So, I think these are great updates, and Apple's going to sell a lot of them. Now, in terms of the price, Apple is just maintaining the exact same price for these new iPads as the current ones. So, in other words, the cheapest is going to be $499, and that's the Wi-Fi version. The other thing is Apple hasn't changed the storage sizes. The sizes of storage still come in 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. And some people are disappointed. They had hoped that Apple would go to a higher gigabyte in storage of 128 gigabytes. But I think Apple's challenge is to keep these prices. So, Steve Jobs and Apple sort of emphasize that, the prices are still very reasonable. So the Wi-Fi versions come in $499, $599, $699. So essentially, for $100 more, you double the gigabytes, and for another $100 more, you double it again. And the Wi-Fi versions are essentially $130 more. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi and 3G models are essentially $130 more than just the Wi-Fi counterpart. So they come in the models are $629 for 16 gigabytes, $729 for 32 gigabytes, and $829 for 64 gigabytes. And what Steve Jobs points out is that all of these models, except one, the $829, are cheaper than the $799 announced price of its only real competitor right now, the Motorola Xoom. So, I think these are great updates, and Apple's going to sell a lot of them. Now, in terms of the price, Apple is just maintaining the exact same price for these new iPads as the current ones. So, in other words, the cheapest is going to be $499, and that's the Wi-Fi version. The other thing is Apple hasn't changed the storage sizes. The sizes of storage still come in 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. And some people are disappointed. They had hoped that Apple would go to a higher gigabyte in storage of 128 gigabytes. But I think Apple's challenge is to keep these prices. So, Steve Jobs and Apple sort of emphasize that, the prices are still very reasonable. So the Wi-Fi versions come in $499, $599, $699. So essentially, For $100 more, you double the gigabytes. And for another $100 more, you double it again. And the Wi-Fi versions are essentially $130 more. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi and 3G models are essentially $130 more than just the Wi-Fi counterpart. So they come in the models are $629 for 16 gigabytes, $729 for 32 gigabytes, and $829 for 64 gigabytes. And what Steve Jobs points out is that all of these models, except one, the $829, are cheaper than the $799 announced price of its only real competitor right now, the Motorola Xoom. So, I think these are great updates, and Apple's going to sell a lot of them. Now, in terms of the price, Apple is just maintaining the exact same price for these new iPads as the current ones. So, in other words, the cheapest is going to be $499, and that's the Wi-Fi version. The other thing is Apple hasn't changed the storage sizes. The sizes of storage still come in 16 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. And some people are disappointed. They had hoped that Apple would go to a higher gigabyte in storage of 128 gigabytes. But I think Apple's challenge is to keep these prices. So, Steve Jobs and Apple sort of emphasize that, the prices are still very reasonable. So the Wi-Fi versions come in $499, $599, $699. So essentially, for $100 more, you double the gigabytes, and for another $100 more, you double it again. And the Wi-Fi versions are essentially $130 more. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi and 3G models are essentially $130 more than just the Wi-Fi counterpart. So they come in the models are $629 for 16 gigabytes, $729 for 32 gigabytes, and $829 for 64 gigabytes. And what Steve Jobs points out is that all of these models, except one, the $829, are cheaper than the $799 announced price of its only real competitor right now, the Motorola Xoom. So, I think these are great updates, and Apple's going to sell a lot of them. Okay, so one of the things that got upgraded the other day was the Twitter app. And in the iTunes Store, Twitter is now up to version 3.3. Now, what's in 3.3? There's some drastic changes. One is a thing called Quick Bar, which shows trends and other important things without leaving your timeline. Quick Bar, swipe the Quick Bar left-right to cycle through trends based on your location. It says there's a cleaner redesigned tweet compose screen, automatically shortens URLs, just paste them in, and they will only count as 20 characters. Then there's something called autocomplete, usernames and hashtags, easier phone uploading, photo uploading, find friends using your phone contacts. So it'll search your phone contacts, and improved DM conversion view now works similar to SMS chat, cleaned up preferences and bug fix. So, some people upgraded and don't like it. So let's upgrade. Okay, so I upgraded, and when I get into the new version and I first launch, I get this window that says, "What's new? Find your friends on Twitter by scanning your contacts. Discover what's trending now with the Quick Bar. Try swiping." Well, I don't want to find friends. I don't want it to tap into my email, my contacts, and look for friends. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to click Close. Okay, so when you go into it, I really don't like the new version of Twitter because if you look here, you've got this trend bar, which sort of blocks the view. And to me, it just clutters the interface of Twitter. And so, I really don't like it. So the question is, what do you do if you want to go back and uninstall an app and go to the older version? How do you do that? And so let's take a look at how you would do that. First, just delete the app from your iPhone. That's one way. You can do it through iTunes, but just delete it. Delete this version. Just hold down with your finger, and you'll get the X, and click the X, and it'll say delete, and it'll delete all the data. But that's okay with an app like Twitter. And also, if you've backed up on iTunes, it's not a big deal. So you just delete, because Twitter has all the stuff in the cloud. And in any case, if you've backed up, it's there. So just delete the app. So that's step one. Okay, so what do you do next? Well, if you go into iTunes and you go into the apps section, you see all your apps. Here are all your apps. And the Twitter app, the most recent version, if you go over to date modified, it's March 4th. So this is the latest version, and this is the version that I don't want. So when you sync up, you're going to get back the most recent version. So how do you go back and get a prior version of an app that's in iTunes? Well, the key thing is, where are prior versions? Well, one place for prior versions is in the trash, because if you look here, when you upgrade, you get your apps here in the garbage, so they go automatically there. So one thing that you could do, here's the older Twitter. Well, here's one version of Twitter app, and you could drag it back into, this is the date modified, this is the January 19th version. So you could switch it out with the one that's in iTunes. Now the ones in iTunes, if you want to find out where it is, you right click and you say show in Finder, and here it is. It's in this path under here in my iTunes folder under mobile applications is the old Twitter. So one way to get your old version of the app is to drag out the more recent one out of that folder, and then drag out of garbage the version that you want and put it into that folder. Okay, so that's one way. But what if you threw away your garbage? How are you going to get it back? Well, there's another way. And what a lot of people don't know is that your apps that are in iTunes are backed up if you have Time Machine. Time Machine is the service that backs everything to an external hard drive. So let's enter Time Machine, and here's what's so cool. We go into Time Machine, and we go back in time. I'll go back a couple of days, and let's see, we're going to go to earlier this week, and look at this. I'll stop, and look at this. The Twitter app, version 3.2.2, which is the January version, is there. And all I have to do to restore it is click Restore Twitter 3.2.2. And it's going to say restore it. So look at this. Check this out. Choose a folder for the restored app. And I'm going to go into iTunes. And I'm going to go into, what am I going into? Mobile applications. And that's where I'm going to put it. And it says the location to which you were restoring already contains an item with the same name. And I click replace. And boom, there I have the prior version. So when I sync the iPhone, the older version of Twitter is going to be there. So that's just a nice little tip if you ever want to go back to a prior version of an app. Okay, so one of the more funny things that happened after the launch of the iPad was that Conan O'Brien did a skit where they made fun of Apple's presentation on March 2nd. And I guess it was called Apple Gets Cocky About the iPad. And it was from teamcoco.com. And so basically, in the app, in the video, it's sort of making fun of the serious team members of Apple and how they overly take so serious what goes on with the iPad. So let's see what they do here. So again, it's the Apple theme. With
iPad 2 is the culmination of.
They got a guy with a shaved head named Lars Verdin.
Incredible how little we did. We knew that if we changed the color,
he's making fun of it. We knew if we changed the color,
made it a little faster,
and added some cheap cameras into it,
flattened it a bit,
and it kind of flattened it a bit,
people would just go nuts.
One of my favorite things about the iPad 2 launch
when they have a guy with an accent who's named Graham Davies.
Against white backgrounds.
So, it's a clever little parody. And it's made its rounds on the internet. Now, one little treat that 9to5mac.com pointed out is that Apple just quickly, I guess today, maybe on March 4th, made available a free book in the iBookstore called the iPad User Guide for iOS 4.3. And I guess you can pre-order it. It's free. And I did so in the iBookstore. So I'm not sure what's going to be in the guide because the iPad is so intuitive. But if you're looking for something free, go into the iBookstore and I guess order this free guide from Apple on the new iOS. Now, by the end of the week, Apple stock was way up basically on the news of what happened on the iPad 2 event, because I think the financial community viewed the iPad 2 and what Apple announced to be very positive. In other words, Apple has taken a further lead on its competitors. And to give you a sense, Apple ended on March 4th, Friday, up to $360 a share. Now, its 52-week high is $364 a share. So this is up at, sort of the height of Apple stock. To give you a sense of the last 5 days. Now, look, this is on Wednesday, the trading was down to as low as $348. That's on Tuesday, the day before the March 2nd event. Now look on March 2nd, as the event goes forward, look at this spike right here of volume, because that's around the time of the event. And so I think people are very positive. The next day, and also the market was up a lot too, Apple surges up to 358. Now this is pretty amazing. Apple, let's take a look at its market cap. I mean, it's enormous. Apple's market cap is $331 billion. I mean, it's quite an amazing market cap. I mean, that's what, if you added up all the stock and multiplied by the price. Now, to give you a sense of how big that is, Apple's competitor in terms of being a bigger company is Exxon. So Apple's market cap is $331 billion, and Exxon, whose symbol is still ahead at $421 billion, because I guess Exxon stock is up too. But in any case, Apple's in tremendous, I guess, financial health. So the question is, what's next for Apple? We just had these two big announcements in back-to-back weeks. The week before, we had Apple's Lion iOS operating system come out for the Macintosh in beta for developers. And at the same time, we had new MacBook Pros come out that had the new Sandy Bridge processor from Intel, plus the Thunderbolt connection from Intel. And then this week we have iPad 2. So what's going to be next? Well, what I think what's going to be next is very soon we're going to see new updated iMacs, because the iMacs haven't been updated since late last summer. And remember, last summer they were updated after the MacBook Pros. So my prediction is sometime in end of March, maybe early April, you'll see iMacs that have the Sandy Bridge processors in them, and that have the Thunderbolt LightPeak connection in them. And I think they'll drop the price of the SSDs and have even some smaller SSD drives in there. So that's one. But also, we were expecting at the iPad 2 event Mobile Me. So we didn't have any Mobile Me update, and there's been rumors and talk that the Mobile Me operating system will become a cloud-based service. So we haven't seen that yet, and I think that's going to come. I think very soon we're going to see the ability to store music and movies that you bought from iTunes in Mobile Me for free and stream them to your iDevices and to your computer. And maybe Apple will also allow music and movies that you didn't buy from Mobile Me to be saved in the cloud. Now, what I would like is also if Time Machine could be backed up by Apple in the cloud. That would be epic if Apple did that. So these are the things that I'm hoping to see in the coming weeks. I think we're going to get an announcement regarding Mobile Me, and I think we're going to get an announcement regarding the iMacs. Okay, so one of the more interesting observations and commentaries that I want to end this week's podcast with is something that Josh Topolsky, the editor of Engadget, said. And he was talking about Apple and its iPad 2 presentation. And here's a quote I put up on my blog from Josh Topolsky. He says, Apple isn't just challenging perceptions of the PC. They're saying that the age of the PC is over, at least for most people. The company is forcing consumers to ask if they even still want or need something called a PC, while of course making sure to point out that the competition is playing the same old game. And really, that's all part of the plan. Apple is in the process of making the iPad the de facto standard for what the next stage of computing looks like, from the look and feel to the kind of software and experiences you have on the device. Apple doesn't just want to own the market, it wants to own the idea of the market. We've seen this act before, and we know how it ends. There was a time before the iPod 2 when companies like HP, Samsung, and even Microsoft fought against Apple for the hearts and minds of consumers, but I'll be damned if anyone can remember it. So it's a very powerful thing that he's saying, which is really Apple is trying to change the mindset for how people view computers. Computers, for a long time have been these sort of highly technical, clunky desktop or clunky laptop devices. And Apple is instead making them highly easy to use, highly functional, intuitive, highly mobile, highly organic devices. Anyway, that's the show this week, and I'm also going to come out with the iPad podcast later this weekend. So this is Lexstar at maxfuture.com. You can leave a voicemail at the Google Voice number of 617-826-9676. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.